Have you ever had your company roll out like a shiny new software system or maybe a new messaging app?
Oh, yeah. The classic "we bought a new toy"
Yeah,
announcement.
exactly. Or even, an AI assistant, and they're expecting everyone to be absolutely thrilled about it, but then you find that it just completely drains your will to work.
It's the worst. You sit down at your desk,
Yeah.
you open the new interface, and suddenly, like, everything that used to take 5 minutes now takes 20.
Literally 20 minutes. You're clicking through, what, 5 different menus just to log a really simple task, and you can practically feel your motivation just evaporating.
Yeah, and you're sitting there looking at the screen, wondering why this massive, highly expensive upgrade feels like a demotion, you know?
A demotion,
You
exactly.
go from feeling like a really competent professional
Yeah.
to, feeling like an intern who doesn't even know how to use the printer.
That feeling is just incredibly common. And actually, it is the exact mission of our deep dive today. We are unpacking a really fascinating brief by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover, and it's titled Designing Motivating Digital
It's
Workplaces.
a great read.
It really is. Our goal here is to decode how the tools that surround us at work actually shape our motivation. And more importantly, what leaders should be doing about it to, stop driving their teams absolutely crazy.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Because it feels like we've all been victims of a bad tech rollout at some point in our
Oh,
careers.
we absolutely have. And I think the stakes for getting this right are, well, they're much higher than just minor workplace annoyances.
Right? It's not just complaining in the break room.
Exactly. We are looking at a landscape right now where millennials and Gen Z workers are consistently citing outdated or even just poorly implemented tools as a credible primary reason to quit a job.
Wow, so they'll actually walk out the door over bad software. They will. It's a retention crisis masquerading as an IT problem. Ubiquitous computing has redrawn the boundaries of work so fast, completely reshaping like who we collaborate with, when we do it, how we do it, that companies just haven't been able to absorb the psychological changes.
That makes a lot of sense.
So for a modern executive asking, what does this new software do to employee motivation is no longer some soft HR question. It is a critical bottom line operational input.
Because, if the tools break the workflow or if they just make the user miserable, the work simply doesn't happen.
Right.
But to really fix this motivation problem, we have to define the environment first. We need to understand what we're actually talking about when we say technology, because we aren't just talking about laptops and monitors here, right?
Right. That is a really crucial distinction. The research breaks the modern workplace technology portfolio down into 3 distinct layers. And if you don't understand these layers, you cannot design a motivating environment.
Okay, so what's layer one?
The first layer is spatial physical. So this is your built environment. We're talking about the ergonomics, the physical layout of the office, the lighting, the furniture.
Okay, so like the standing desks, the glass partitions, maybe those soundproof phone booths that literally every startup seems to have now.
You got it. That's layer 1. Then you move to the second layer, which is the operational layer.
Operational.
Yeah, this is the information and communication technology, or ICT. So this includes your enterprise software, your ERP systems, robotics on manufacturing floor, your communication platforms.
So these are the tools that actually mediate the work itself, like the stuff we usually picture when someone says work tech.
Exactly, the functional tools. But then there's the third layer. And this one is growing the fastest, and honestly, it's the most disruptive. It's the augmentative layer.
The augmentative layer.
Yeah. This encompasses AI, advanced analytics, gamification engines, algorithmic management. And this layer is entirely different because it doesn't just, sit there waiting for you to use it to do your work. It increasingly interprets the data and actually directs the work.
Oh, wow.
It tells you what to prioritize.
So it's literally software actively managing your day.
Exactly.
And here is where we hit like the big aha moment from the brief. Out of all these layers, across all these billions of dollars spent on enterprise technology, the core finding is that technology rarely motivates us directly.
Which, is a very bitter pill for a lot of tech vendors to swallow. They really want to believe their shiny new dashboard is inherently inspiring.
Right. That makes me think of an analogy. It's like buying a state-of-the-art 6-figure luxury stove for a master chef.
Okay, I like this.
Right. So the stove is beautiful, but it has this mandatory built-in screen that tells the chef exactly how much salt to use, and it completely locks the oven door if it disagrees with the chef's recipe.
Well, that sounds like a nightmare for a chef.
Exactly. The stove works perfectly from a technical standpoint, but you've stripped the chef of their autonomy. So the tool itself is a marvel, but the environment it creates for the professional is just miserable.
That captures the dynamic perfectly.
Yeah.
The tool itself is neutral, really, but the restrictions it imposes are what kill the drive.
Well, wait, let me push back a little bit here. What about the sheer flexibility of remote work? Doesn't working from a smartphone or, taking your laptop to your couch directly motivate people? Because the tech itself enables that lifestyle.
What's fascinating here is the concept of mediators. The smartphone itself isn't the motivator.
It's not.
No, think about it. The smartphone can just as easily be used by a micromanager to ping you at 11:00 p.m. on a Saturday.
Ugh, true. Which is highly demotivating.
Right. What the technology actually does is reshape these underlying psychological mediators,
Right.
things like your sense of autonomy, the variety of skills you get to use in a day, and your perceived control over your workflow. The technology changes the mediator, and the mediator is what actually drives the motivation.
Ah, okay, so it's a chain reaction. It's an indirect relationship.
That's the mechanism, yeah. For instance, the brief highlights this research by Knight and Westbrook on telecommuting. They found that ICT flexibility, so the ability to choose when and where to work using technology, is a massive motivator because it fundamentally expands the worker's autonomy.
Right, the tech is just the vehicle. The autonomy is the actual destination.
Exactly. And this actually updates older organizational models that used to think of technology as just a hygiene factor, meaning like it was something that could only prevent dissatisfaction if it worked properly, but could never actually inspire you to work harder.
Okay, so if technology operates by shifting our sense of autonomy and control, what happens when it shifts those things in the wrong direction? Because, we've all been in situations where a new tool makes us feel way less in control.
Well, the human and organizational consequences of that downward shift are profound. This ties into something in organizational psychology called the job demands resources model.
Wait, define that for me really quickly. What are the demands and what are the resources in a normal office setting?
Sure. Think of your job as a scale. On one side, you have your demands, so the deadlines, the complex tasks, the emotional labor of dealing with, angry clients.
Okay.
On the other side, you have your resources. That's your skills, your supportive colleagues, and critically, your tools. The model shows that when you have adequate resources, you can handle high demands. But inadequate technological resources, like a glitchy platform or a really convoluted workflow, they act as a direct antecedent of psychological strain. The scale tips, and you burn out.
Oh, so the tool actually becomes an extra demand instead of a resource.
Precisely. There is this fascinating study mentioned in the text by researchers Bala and Venkatesh. They used what's called a latent growth approach.
Which means what exactly?
All that really means is they didn't just take a single snapshot. They continuously tracked employees over time during a massive software rollout to see how their feelings evolved.
Oh, more nice.
Yeah, they tracked an ERP, an enterprise resource planning system implementation. And they showed that during the rollout, employees' perceived job characteristics heavily fluctuated, literally day by day.
Meaning they felt like the fundamental nature of their jobs kept changing underneath them depending on how the software was behaving that day?
Yes. And their sense of control completely tanked. That loss of control caused immediate, measurable spikes in psychological strain and negative attitudes toward the company.
Wow.
And the scariest part for leaders is that it doesn't even have to be a massive system overhaul to cause this. Other research in the brief shows that even modest everyday hardware friction, like a frozen screen, a dropped video connection, a mouse that lags, it accumulates over the course of a workday into a very real, measurable negative mood.
It's death by 1,000 buffering screens, basically.
Exactly.
And here's where it gets really interesting. It's not just the worker who suffers when the tech is bad. There is a massive ripple effect onto external stakeholders.
Right.
If you are frustrated by your tools, the people you're trying to help are going to feel that frustration.
The stakeholder impact is the hidden, often completely uncalculated cost of bad workplace technology.
Yeah, the brief gives this incredible example from healthcare. It shows that motivated, adequately equipped clinical staff directly correlate with better patient experiences.
Right.
If a nurse is standing at a bedside fighting with a tablet to input patient data because the drop-down menus don't make sense, they aren't looking the patient in the eye. They aren't picking up on those subtle visual cues about the patient's pain levels. The tech friction actively degrades the human care.
We see the exact same pattern in public administration, too. Studies connect workplace attributes directly to citizen-facing service quality.
What?
Yeah. If a public worker is battling some clunky legacy database, the citizen on the other side of the desk gets slower, less empathetic service. The causal chain is remarkably clear. The technology shapes the mediators, like autonomy and perceived control. Those mediators shape the employee's motivation. And then that motivation ultimately dictates the quality of the experience the stakeholder receives.
Man, it's all connected. You can't have a good customer experience without a good employee experience, and you just can't have that without good tools.
Exactly.
So, having established how dangerous it is to get this wrong, let's talk about the solution. How do organizations actually get this right? The brief lays out a tactical playbook with 5 evidence-based responses.
Right.
The first concept is that you have to redesign jobs around the new technology, not just force the technology into the old org chart.
And this is where so many companies fail. When you retrofit advanced new technology onto an unchanged role description, motivation almost always plummets. You have to actively map the 5 core job characteristics: skill variety, task identity, task significance, autonomy, and feedback before and after the tech rollout.
Let's use that Siemens Healthineers case study from the brief to illustrate this because I thought it was great. So imagine a hospital gets a massive new medical imaging software system.
This is a perfect example. Siemens realized that as their imaging workflows became more heavily mediated by advanced software, the technologists using the machines were in trouble.
Because they used to do a lot more manually, right?
Exactly. These were highly trained professionals who used to have a rich, varied job configuring the machines and managing the process. But with the new software automating so much of the technical work, they were at risk of becoming mere button pressers.
Their task identity, so that feeling of completing a whole identifiable piece of work from start to finish, it was being completely compressed by the automation.
It was eroding their professional identity. So instead of just letting them be bored button pressers, Siemens redesigned the job itself. They reframed the technologists' roles to encompass the entire diagnostic pathway.
Oh, that's smart.
They gave them more responsibility in patient interaction, in protocol selection, and in collaborating directly with the radiologists. By expanding the human elements of the role around the new tech, they restored the meaning and significance of the work.
Okay, so expanding the job description makes sense on a macro level, but what happens when that technologist, or really any employee, actually sits down at their computer for 8 hours? Like, how do you prevent the software itself from micromanaging them? That leads us to the second response: implementing technology in ways that actively support autonomy and competence.
This concept is deeply rooted in self-determination theory, which essentially dictates that humans have fundamental psychological needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
Right.
If a tool frustrates those basic needs, we will inevitably reject it. Practically speaking, this means organizations need to default to employee configurability whenever possible.
Like letting people customize their own dashboards.
Exactly. Let them control their notification settings so they aren't constantly interrupted. And critically, you have to place hard boundaries on surveillance features.
Because no one wants to feel like Big Brother is logging their keystrokes or, tracking how long their mouse is idle.
It destroys trust instantly. The absolute masterclass in doing this correctly comes from Buurtzorg, the massive Dutch home nursing organization. They built a lightweight digital platform for scheduling, documentation, and peer learning.
Okay.
But the brilliant part is what the app doesn't do. It explicitly leaves all clinical and team-based decisions up to the nurses themselves. The app handles the administrative logistics, but it never overrides their professional judgment. It is autonomy supporting, not autonomy replacing. It just clears the path so they can focus on nursing.
I love that. It actually treats them like adults.
It does.
And speaking of treating employees with respect, the third tactic is all about procedural justice and participation. This is the idea that you should actually let employees pick and configure their tools in the first place.
Because the simple act of participation satisfies that innate psychological need for competence we just talked about.
Yeah.
When you involve the end user from day one, not only do you end up with a tool that actually fits the workflow, because let's face it, the frontline workers know things the software designers just don't, but you also convey deep respect for their expertise.
Yeah, the city of Helsinki did this when they were modernizing their public service workplaces. They literally let the employees lead the configuration of their new co-working spaces. They didn't just, pick out chair colors. They designed how the spaces would actually function.
Yes.
And what the research highlights here is fascinating. The actual function of the space obviously matters, but the symbolism of being asked for their opinion matters just as much. The procedural justice, The perceived fairness of the process itself shifts their mindset from feeling controlled to feeling like an active participant.
It validates that they are the experts of their own workflow. Now, the fourth response in the playbook focuses on building digital capability. But it highlights a specific concept that I just find deeply fascinating. Means efficacy.
Wait, means efficacy. I've heard of self-efficacy, like, believing in my own skills and knowing I can do my job, but what on earth means efficacy?
I love this distinction. I could geek out about this all day.
Please do.
Okay, so self-efficacy is believing in yourself. It means efficacy is believing that your tools actually work.
Oh, wow.
You can be the most confident, highly skilled worker in the world. But if you do not trust the machine you are operating, if you think the data is flawed or the software is going to crash and lose your work, your performance will drop.
That is so true.
And when the demands of new technology outpace an employee's skill development, they experience massive cognitive dissonance. Instead of trying to learn the new tool, they revert to self-protection. They hide, they complain, and they create elaborate manual workarounds just to avoid using the new system.
So when a rollout fails, it's not necessarily a training issue, it's a trust issue. They don't believe the means are effective.
That is the core issue. To combat this, several European manufacturing groups took a really innovative approach. They set up digital shop floor academies for their CNC operators, the workers running complex computer numeric controlled manufacturing equipment.
Okay.
They didn't just dump a bunch of generic e-learning modules on them and walk away. They paired short-cycle, hands-on training with peer mentoring. But more importantly, they installed visible reliability dashboards. They went out of their way to prove to the workers that the new advanced manufacturing technology was reliable and safe. They systematically built, that means efficacy, alongside the workers' self-efficacy.
That makes so much sense. You actually have to prove the tool is worthy of their trust.
Precisely.
Now, this brings us to the fifth tactical response, and it's one that usually gets a lot of high rolls, I think, gamification.
Oh, yeah.
And I have to push back a little here. Isn't gamification usually just corporate bribery? Like when my HR software gives me digital confetti for updating my password?
That's the worst.
Right. It doesn't make me feel fulfilled. It makes me feel like I'm being treated like a toddler. Slapping digital badges on boring work just feels like a trick.
You are absolutely right to be skeptical, and the research completely validates that skepticism. Gamification fails spectacularly when you try to graft extrinsic rewards like points or meaningless badges onto tasks that are already intrinsically interesting, or when you use it purely to force routine compliance. It just breeds cynicism and makes adults feel patronized.
Congratulations, you filled out your expense report on time. Here's a virtual bronze shield.
Exactly, it's insulting. Where gamification actually works is when it is designed around flow theory.
And what does flow state actually look like in an office context?
Flow is that state of deep, effortless concentration, where you lose track of time because the challenge of the task perfectly matches your skill level. Good gamification strengthens the feedback loop so you know exactly how you're doing, and it constantly calibrates the challenge to match your growing skills.
Okay, so it should help you track your own mastery, not bribe you.
Right. And the literature offers a massive warning here. Organizations must avoid using leaderboards in interdependent work.
Because if my success depends on collaborating with you, a leaderboard just pits us against each other. It creates toxic competition and destroys teamwork.
Yes, it erodes the psychological need for relatedness. The brief points to Deloitte's Leadership Academy as a prime example of doing this right. They didn't just hand out prizes for logging into a portal. They anchored their gamification in genuine learning challenges.
So the game elements were tied to actual professional mastery and problem solving, not just, checking boxes for compliance.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the horizon, really. Fixing today's software rollouts is necessary. But as we know, technology cycles are moving incredibly fast. We aren't just talking about a new email client anymore. We're talking about Industry 4.0, generative AI, advanced robotics.
Yeah.
Any specific design choice we make today will probably be obsolete in a few years.
The ground is shifting constantly.
So what does this all mean for the big picture? Like, how do organizations actually build long-term resilience so they aren't just constantly playing whack-a-mole with employee morale every time there's a tech update?
Well, the brief outlines 3 forward-looking pillars to secure that long-term capability. Pillar 1 is to recalibrate the psychological contract between the employer and the employee. Trust is the new load-bearing element in the workplace.
Because the tech is getting so intimate, it's reading our emails, it's summarizing our meetings.
It knows everything about how we work. Organizations have to be radically transparent about data use. They need to make visible, binding commitments that they're using AI to augment human workers, not displace them.
Because if you introduce an AI assistant and people think it's ultimately there to study their workflow and steal their jobs, they'll sabotage it.
Of course they will. They will feed it bad data.
Yeah.
The tool triggers a primal defensive response unless that psychological contract is explicitly renegotiated and secured.
Which leads right into pillar 2, continuous learning as infrastructure.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, if technology is changing this fast, learning can no longer be an episodic HR program. It can't be a mandatory seminar you attend once a year in a fluorescent-lit conference room.
Right.
It has to be built directly into the operating model of the business. Organizations need to create actual time budgets that protect learning hours from daily operational pressures. And they need career architectures that actively reward adaptability rather than just rewarding tenure or raw output.
Learning has to be treated as part of the actual job, not a hobby you are expected to do on your lunch break.
Exactly.
And finally, pillar 3, steward data and algorithms.
This addresses the newest, most complex layer of workplace tech. Algorithms are now doing the sequencing of work. They are directing employee attention, and in many cases, they are evaluating performance.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. These algorithmic managers have to be governed transparently. There needs to be real employee voice in how these algorithms are designed and trained. And there must be clear human escalation paths for when they inevitably produce an unjust or nonsensical outcome. They have to be treated as supportive infrastructure, not as opaque, unquestionable overseers.
And that really summarizes the ultimate lesson here for you, the listener. Workplace technology is no longer just background music playing while you do your job. It is the environment itself. The next time a new tool is introduced at your job, or the next time you are the one deciding to introduce a new platform to your team, the question to ask isn't simply, will this shiny new thing motivate people? The real question is, how does this reshape my autonomy, the quality of my feedback, and my perceived control over my own work?
This raises an important question, though, something that builds on everything we've discussed today. We talk about how crucial it is to believe your tools work, that concept of means efficacy. But as AI and algorithmic managers become a larger, more dominant part of that augmentative layer, evaluating our performance and assigning our tasks in real time. What happens to our motivation when we can no longer see how the tool is making its decisions? When the boss dictating your daily workflow is literally a black box of code, who do you complain to, and how do you maintain trust in a system that you and maybe even your company's IT department can't even fully comprehend?
That is a chilling thought, and one that every leader rolling out a new intelligent system needs to wrestle with before their best people walk out the door. We'll leave you to ponder that scenario. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.